everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my July wrap-up. I was in a really bad reading slump this month and I still am. I did talk about in my TBR how in July I read like 9 books, which is actually a lie because I read 10. I just literally forgot to put one of them into my spreadsheet. So I read 10 books this month, which is like pretty low for me for this year. The lowest amount of books that I've read this year has been 9. I read 9 in January, so it is a little bit low for me, and it is the lowest amount of pages that I've read so far this year. A lot of these books that I read this month were for summer ween, so I won't talk too in depth about those books, and I will just have the reading vlog linked down below because it's a pretty good reading vlog. I really liked filming it even though I was in a reading slump and I got sick, but I did really enjoy that reading vlog. And I always say I'm not going to talk too in depth about the books that are in my reading vlogs, and I still do anyways, but I'm filming a lot of videos today because I'm moving back to college, so I'm trying to like pre-film for the month, so we need to get her going. We need to, so you know what I'm saying? So we're not going to spend too much time. This is going to be a quick, fast wrap-up. So starting with my stats, as always, in July I read 10 books, 3 of those are by POC authors, and I read 2,518 pages. For genre, I read 6 horror, 1 literary fiction, 1 mystery, 1 romance, and 1 thriller. For format, I had 2 that I completely read on audiobook, 2 that I completely read as ebooks, 1 that I read completely as a physical book, and then 5 that were a hybrid of normally audiobook with an ebook or a physical book. And then for audience, 6 were adult, 1 was a middle grade, 1 was new adult, and 2 were YA. For ratings, I had 1 2-star, 2 3-stars, 1 3.5 stars, 3 4 stars, 1 4.5, and 2 5 stars. For the type of book, I read 5 novels, 4 novellas, and 1 short story collection. And then for author status, 4 were new to me and 6 were repeat authors. So now we are going to start off with my lowest rated book, which was a 2-star, and I'm really sad to say this, but that is Broken Dolls by McKay Watson. Obviously, McKay is here on BookTube. McKay's book vlogs used to be McKay's book club, and I absolutely loved them by McKay. It literally made me throw up, but like in a good way. I absolutely adored that book, so I was really sad to give this one 2 stars. And I'm gonna review this book like I don't know McKay at all because I want to be honest and keep it real with y'all, because that's like, we have trust here, okay? We have trust, and I want to keep that trust, so I'm going to review this and not really sugarcoat anything because that's how I feel. So in this book, we follow a woman and her daughter, and they kind of just live out in the country by themselves in a very secluded area. So one day they get a knock on their door from this man with a younger boy, and extreme horror things start to happen. This is supposed to be like a home invasion plot. I buddy read this with Hailey while I was with her. We read it on her Patreon reading sprints because we were just so excited to read it. We both absolutely loved them. And at the end of each reading sprint, we would literally look at each other and go, and then not know what to say to the actual reading sprints because, well, one, we didn't finish the book yet, so we didn't really know how we fully felt, but we also didn't want to, you know, say anything too drastic or harsh. But we've talked about this book a lot, and we've basically both come to the same conclusion. So I've talked about extreme horror on my channel a little bit. I'm not an extreme horror reader. I know there are some channels that read completely extreme horror, like McKay and Megan, and I don't. I've read a couple, and I have an extreme horror reading vlog that I really enjoyed making on my channel. And for the most part, I really like the genre, but I think I'm really good at picking out books that I really like. And for the most part, the reason I love extreme horror is because I love exploring the darker side of humanity. It's very cathartic because a lot of the darker feelings that you are feeling inside are reflected on the outside. But what I love about extreme horror is the nuance and the depth to it. That's what I need to make an extreme horror better for me, and them had that. Them had such a strong meaning and purpose and extremely strong character development. That's something I really loved about that story because it kind of was like a plot that necessarily wasn't for me. It was more like sci-fi. It wasn't my traditional plot story that I kind of like, or my traditional like subgenre, but the depth and the nuance of the story really made it really made the story so beautiful for me. And of course, you are allowed to have like a little gory moment where, you know, just slicing and dicing and it's not too serious. But I think in extreme horror, because it is so gory and because of the amount of brutality, I think for me personally, I just need the depth and nuance to kind of offset that. I've read pretty graphic books and really enjoyed them. I just think for me personally, extreme horror needs to have depth and nuance and character development to it for me, because if not, it literally feels like torture porn. Like, it doesn't feel like a good fun time. I'm gonna now talk more specifically about this book because those are kind of more like general thoughts, but in Broken Dolls, I will say the one thing I did like is McKay's writing. McKay has amazing writing and is so good at describing what's going on. The descriptions are horrific, and there are like almost lyrical in a way, but not. And I just really enjoy McKay's writing overall. The things I didn't like. This book did not have any character development at all. It literally had nothing to it. I feel like I didn't know the characters. I didn't really know the villain. And nothing really made sense. There were no motivations, no nothing. And I think it's fine to have like a villain that has no motivation. That happens in No One Writes for Free, where the villain is just kind of like a sick, twisted person who just wants to cause harm to people and doesn't care about others. But in this one, it didn't even dive into those kind of themes and thoughts. So the villain, we literally don't know what their motivation is. If it's just to be sick and twisted, I feel like that could have been said in, not in those exact terms, because it wasn't said like that in No One Writes for Free by Judith Sonnet. It wasn't. It was more said in like a roundabout way. And I feel like that could have been done in this story, but it wasn't. And I feel like I didn't know the motivation of the character, and I really didn't feel attached to anybody. I really felt attached to the main character and them, Jeanette. See, I literally remember her name and I never remember characters' names, and that's because I just loved her so much. And in this one, I didn't really feel that. And so a lot of stuff happens at the end that I feel like would have been more impactful if I actually felt something for the characters, which I didn't. There was actually a major twist at the end that I feel like I could have really liked, but it just had nothing behind it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just didn't have anything behind it. And then, as I said, there was literally like no depth or nuance to this story at all, which is, again, fine, but because of the content of this story, it just felt like someone was getting off on this story. That's what it felt like. And as I said, I'm going to review this book like I don't know the author personally, because if I read this story from anybody else and I didn't know the author, I would literally be like, this was somebody writing something that they just wanted to write and kind of get off on. And that's nothing to say about McKay personally, but as I said, if I didn't know the author, that's what I would think. I would be like, the author literally just wanted to write about children being harmed and being raped and assaulted, because I will say, main thing about this book, the main trauma and brutality is done against 12-year-old children, including rape, including incest, including all of that. And for me, if you want to have that in there, fine, cool, but add some depth, add some nuance to balance out the story. The story was not balanced for me personally. That's all that I really have to say about this. I feel like the end was very unsatisfactory as well, and a story for me, extreme horror doesn't have to be in a neat bow to be satisfactory, because that's not the genre at all. But it just kind of like left me with a lot of questions. Like, nothing was answered throughout the entire story at all. And as I said, characters weren't really developed, and there was nothing there. It literally felt like reading literal CP and abuse against children, which for me is not necessarily something that I want to read, okay? Like, it made me feel sick, and not in like a, oh my god, like I'm reading an extreme horror that's making me throw up way. It made me feel sick in like a, like, I'm not feeling good, like, no. And, you know, maybe that was the intention, but for me, I can definitely, like, tell the difference between an extreme horror that's making me feel uncomfortable, it's making me feel grossed out, it's making me throw up, but that is really, like, adding so much punch and power behind this story versus this, where I just was like, okay, like, So that's my thoughts on Broken Dolls. The next book that I read that was a 3-star was A House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Malerman. In this, we follow 2 teenagers, and they are kind of just like in this boat one day. They are like kind of developing feelings for each other. I don't think they're in a relationship at the beginning, but I can't remember. And they discover this house at the bottom of the lake, and that's really just the whole plot, is them kind of exploring this house at the bottom of the lake and kind of like having a romance. I know some people have had a problem with, like, basically the story is a lot of like the teenagers just getting it on, and I didn't really have a problem with that. I didn't really think it was overwhelming to me, but I think in my review I said this was a book that was written. Like, that's all that I had to say, is I just don't have many feelings on the story. It was a book that was written, it was fine. I don't really have many pros and cons. I feel very neutral about the story. Everything just felt kind of okay and mediocre. I didn't really feel like the character development was really bad or really good. I don't feel like the plot was really bad or really good. I don't feel like the writing was really bad or really good. It just really I don't have many thoughts about this book because it didn't really make me feel much or have many thoughts. It was kind of like a no thoughts had empty read. My next 3-star I read in my Summerween reading vlog, and that is Dark Harvest. This one follows a town, I believe in the 60s, and they have this boy thing that comes every year called October Boy or Sawtooth Jack. and they basically lock all of the teenage boys in their room for like a week or something before Halloween. When Halloween comes, October Boy comes out and all the boys are released and they are supposed to go kill him, and whoever kills him, basically their family's kind of given a lot of things, and they believe this is kind of like the only way that they can escape, and they don't have a choice whether to participate in this or not. And he does come back every year, so we're following some characters as this is happening. And this one, again, it was fine. I really enjoyed the writing, kind of like the atmosphere, but I didn't really care about the characters, and I thought the plot kind of went in a direction that wasn't necessarily my favorite. And it was just overall like an okay read. I would recommend it if you're looking for something to read on Halloween or in the Halloween time, or if you're doing like Summerween or you're trying to like get into the Halloween spirit. I would definitely recommend this one, and it's shorter, but it's not something that I'm going to think about for a very long time. Next up, I had a 3.5 star, and that is Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. I read Our Wives Under the Sea by this author earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it, so I wanted to pick this one up. And this is actually like a short story collection, and I think I'm starting to realize that short story collections aren't for me. This one is basically all like feminist stories that have horror, sci-fi, and mythology all like woven into them, so they're all kind of different, but honestly, like, none of these stood out to me at all. I had a good time reading it overall, and some of the concepts were pretty interesting, and I think I can kind of remember like 2 stories a little bit, but I don't really remember the ends. No, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm remembering the plot of more stories, like 3 or 4. I don't really remember like the ends of them or anything. I just kind of remember like the general plot. So, you know, this just really was not a standout for me. This one I didn't read for my Summerween reading vlog, but it's just kind of like another one that I feel like it was a good time reading it. I had a better time reading this than some of the other books that I read this month, but it just wasn't super memorable. I really don't have a ton of thoughts on this one because it is a short story collection and each story is so short. I feel like I just don't have that many full, well-rounded thoughts because it was an okay collection, as I said. Some of the ideas were pretty interesting and I enjoyed them, but I feel like the stories weren't necessarily like super conclusive, and they just kind of like were there and they happened and that was it. So I had a pretty okay time reading this, but I literally won't think about this, and I feel like that about a lot of short story collections recently, a lot that people really love too, so maybe I'm just not a fan of short story collections. So the first 4-star that I read was in my Summerween reading vlog, and that is Deep Trouble by R.L. Stine. This is the 19th book in the Goosebumps series, and I saw this one, I think, just like at a little free library, and I picked it up like a couple weeks before Summerween because I was like, okay, like Goosebumps, Ocean, it's giving Summerween. And this one was pretty fun. I did wish that there was kind of some more horror elements in it, and it wasn't. We follow 2 siblings, and they are on this like research boat with their uncle, because he is actually like an ocean researcher. I don't know what exactly he is, but he's like a scientist that researches the ocean. So they're on this boat with him for the summer, and they kind of discover something that is maybe not necessarily fully human, but is not fully fish either, if you're getting what I'm saying. But I feel like this one could have had a little bit more like horror in it, but it did kind of explore more of like the like human aspects of horror, which I thought was pretty cool for a middle grade book. And this one was just overall like a pretty fun short time. I kind of just really enjoyed like getting back into like reading middle grade again, so maybe I'll start reading some more because the writing is just so fast and fun. It's just such a cute story, even though it is supposed to be like horror. So I'm excited. Maybe I'll try out more Goosebumps books. If you've read any, let me know what your favorites are down below. As I said, I wanted a little bit more horror from this. I know it's a middle grade, but it rarely had any horror in it. So next up is Camp Slaughter, and this is one that was also in my Summerween reading vlog. We follow basically a group of teenagers that are going to this cabin in the woods, and there is also a perspective we get of a man who lives in the woods, and he is kind of a killer, and there's also been known to be disappearances at this cabin, and there's actually also a team of like documentary people, I think, going out there to try and like figure out like what's been going on with these disappearances. They do kind of believe that there's a cannibalistic man out there, and you know, they're not necessarily wrong. So this one was honestly like a fun, gory time. I didn't feel any attachment to the characters at all, though I did not care. I did really like the villain. He's definitely giving like Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes, but I really liked it, and there was exploration of Sergio Gomez's culture in here as well, which I really enjoyed that. But as I said, I didn't really feel any connection to like the main characters. While this was kind of just like a fun little slasher that I enjoyed, it's not gonna be like all my favorites, because for me, like, my favorite slasher I think is Cirque Berserk, and that one I literally felt so much attachment to all the characters, and it was honestly like a conflict because I cared about the villains, I cared about the main characters, so it was kind of like a toss-up. Like, I was literally like pulled in so many different directions, and I feel like that one had a little bit more depth and nuance to it. And as I said, books are allowed to be like just for fun and not have much depth and nuance to them, but usually if they don't, they're not going to get a 5-star from me. Occasionally it's happened, like Verity, The Perfect Marriage, occasionally it'll happen, but not often. So this one got a 4-star. It was really fun. I would definitely recommend it. It's such a good slasher, but you know, it's not my fave. The next 4-star that I had was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This one I'm debating on giving like a 4 or 4.5. I think honestly if I was still giving quarter stars, this one would be like a 4.25. But this one was really fun. I read this for my Patreon book club, and this was the book that we read in July, and I'm really glad that this one was picked because I can't wait to have our discussion. We haven't had it yet, but I'm really excited to have our discussion, and I really had a lot of fun filming our reading vlog. This one was one book I read super quickly, even in my reading slump, so I have to give it props for that. So this follows a caretaker, and she kind of has had a bit of a past happen so far where they believe that, you know, she kind of killed one of her patients, or her, I don't know if they're called patients or clients or what, but basically she left out some medicine and the patient like took them all and died. Well, that's like one part of it. A lot of people also think that like she did it herself, and that she just left it out to make it seem like that. There's a lot of theories about like what happened, but she did accidentally kill a patient or like lead to their death, but she is still working for this company. So they basically sent her on this job to be the caretaker of this woman called Lenora, and Lenora was actually thought to have killed her entire family in the 20s, her sister and her 2 parents, because they were found murdered kind of like in a Lizzie Borden-esque way. And so everybody thinks that she was the killer, but she was never convicted, and now she is kind of like in her own bed. She's very aware, but her whole body's paralyzed except for like one hand, so she can like use it to type or like to tap to communicate, but she's not the best at communicating because she literally can't talk and she's paralyzed. And so she takes this job, and it takes place in the 80s as well, and we also get like flashbacks. They're kind of like more like letter entries or like diary entries from Lenora in the past, and we are learning about her past because she basically tells her main character Kit and is like, I'm gonna tell you what happened that night. I'm gonna tell you the truth about who murdered my family. So I really enjoyed this one. I really liked the atmosphere. It was a little bit slower in the beginning, but it kept me intrigued the entire time. I know some people thought the pacing was off, and that's completely fine, but for me, I still read it so quickly because I wanted to know what was gonna happen, and I really enjoyed the twist at the end. It is kind of like a Riley Sager twist, and I love a twisty thriller, I'm not gonna lie. I will say though, in this book, one of the major twists, I still don't know how I feel about it, okay? Like, it was kind of just like out of nowhere, and Riley Sager sometimes does have twists that are out of nowhere, but I feel like once they happen, I'm like, okay, like, makes sense. And this one, I'm like, I don't know if that made sense. Like, I don't know if there was enough like seeds planted throughout the rest of the story to justify that twist, because it kind of really just like came out of nowhere, I'm not gonna lie. And as I said, Riley Sager's had that before, and it didn't really bother me or didn't really come to mind, but in this one it definitely did, which is why I couldn't give it a full 5 stars, and a 4.5 is kind of like, like, I don't know, because of that twist. It's like a major massive twist. If you read it, you know what I'm talking about. But I have given some Riley Sager's 4 stars, and I enjoyed this one more than those, so that's why I'm like 4.25. I don't know, but the major twist wasn't my favorite because it just seemed a little left field, but a lot of the other twists, okay, I will say there's like multiple major twists, and I enjoyed all of them except for that one, but it was kind of like a big thing. It just like didn't make sense to me. So my 4.5 star for the month was Milk Fed, not the bookmark still being in her. This one I was actually reading for a Patreon reading vlog that I had to carry over into this month, where I was reading some of my patrons like recommendations / favorites, and this one was Hailey's. So or she's recommended this book to me directly a lot of times, and I saw it at a little free library in a reading vlog last month. I found it, and I was like, oh, like, this is meant to be. And so this one follows a woman, and she has a lot of body issues. She is dealing with a severe eating disorder, not really diagnosed, but she is dealing with a severe eating disorder and just disorderly eating in general. So if you are triggered by that content, maybe wouldn't recommend this one, but for me, I kind of relate to it just a little bit, and it was like cathartic for me. So it just depends on where you are in your journey. But so she's dealing with a lot of things and just like life. This one I would put in literary fiction for sure. and she meets this woman who is like this Jewish woman who's bigger, plus size, and she starts to fall in love with her, and they have like a little romance, but she's also kind of coming to terms with her body and like the fact that she is attracted to this woman who's bigger and is not judging her, but she doesn't want that for herself, and like what that means. And this is heavily queer, and I feel like that's talked about, and there's a lot of Jewish culture that's embedded in this story as well, which I really enjoy because I love Jewish TikTok. I'm not gonna lie, I've been on Jewish TikTok for like 2-3 years. I love it there, and I just think Jewish culture is very interesting, so I was enjoying seeing that a lot. And a lot of things that they talked about I already knew because of Jewish TikTok. TikTok is good for some things and some education, guys, okay? And this one, I just had a lot of things in the story that I heavily related to, a lot of different things, and that's why Hailey, I think this one was a 5-star for her. It was 4.5 for me. That's why she recommended this one to me, because she was like, some of the things I know about us are similar. I think that you would like this one, and I definitely really did. I will say this one, some people say that it's pretty weird, and it is a little bit weirder leaning. It's very humorous, but also kind of has like this darker undertone and is kind of like erotic at some points. So she is a little bit weird, as you can see, milk fed. Yeah, it has an interesting cover, and I think you can kind of understand there's definitely some like mother related things talked about in this story as well. But overall, I had a really good time reading it, and I'll definitely be thinking about this one for a while.
So I don't know how this happened. I think it's just like in my spreadsheet, everything is in the order of how I read it. And then I kind of visually, just like when I'm doing the wrap up, like look at it. And then I'm like, okay, there's a 5-star. Let me talk about it. So I think I just ended up missing this one. But somehow I literally missed a 5-star. And I cannot believe it. But I read Grip by Kennedy Ryan. And I actually read this for my swapping screen time for reading vlog, which I actually also met Kennedy Ryan because she was doing the ribbon cutting at a Barnes& Noble that was opening up near me. So I met her and it was amazing. But I filmed part of that reading vlog in June, and then I filmed me reading Grip and meeting Kennedy Ryan in July. So I think to me, I read Grip in June, which is also how I missed it. But this book is literally so good and phenomenal. I originally read the first book in the Grip trilogy, Flow, which is actually a prequel novella, and you have to read it because it adds so much context to Grip and Bristol's story. So in Grip, we follow Grip and Bristol, and they had this whirlwind weekend back years ago, which is what we see in the prequel novella Flow. Now they have a very complex relationship because of that whirlwind night that they had, or weekend, I should say, but also because Grip has done some things to hurt Bristol, and Grip is actually also Bristol's best brother's best friend. So they have a really complex relationship. But recently, Bristol has taken over being Grip's manager because Grip is actually a really popular music artist. Well, back in the prequel novella Flow, he was very like underground. Nobody really knew of him. But now, especially with the help of Bristol and her management, Grip has kind of blown up, and her brother is also a music manager, I believe. And so this has a lot of talk about the music industry, which I really enjoyed because that is huge in the Black community. Music is such a big part of the community, and honestly, you cannot throw a rock without hitting somebody who is making music in the Black community. So many people are making music, and it's just such a large part of the community. So I really enjoyed having that, but the romance in this was absolutely phenomenal. Kennedy Work is so good at crafting characters, which is a vital foundation for crafting a good romance in a relationship because her characters stand so well on their own, but they also have so much when they're together. I don't so much together. What do I even mean? But they really come together to create this super dynamic, real, beautiful, messy relationship, which means so much because they do have like this whirlwind romance that we see and that we dream about ever since we're kids because of like rom-coms and movies we watch as children in High School Musical. That's what did it for me personally. But they also show the realness and the messy side to romance and having a relationship, which is what I love about Kennedy Bryan so much. All of her books do this, and they're just so well, beautifully crafted, and the writing, the characters, the relationship, the dynamics, all of it is so phenomenal. And this honestly had a really crazy plotline at the end. So I feel like this one could honestly appeal to a lot of different readers. This one's not as emotional to me as some of her other books that I've read. It didn't make me cry or anything like that. But if you're kind of like looking to dip your toe into Kennedy Ryan, I would definitely recommend this one because, as I said, it's not as emotional. Unless you want a good cry, unless you want your heart to be ripped out, then I recommend other books. But I feel like this one, the series is like a good place to start. And also, Grip is a Black man, Bristol is a white woman, and that is kind of a big point of contention within this story because um, Bristol literally comes from a rich white family is what I meant to say. And they don't really like her anyways. And so they definitely don't like Grip at all. And Grip's family doesn't really accept Bristol because a big thing in the community, the black community, is that black men a lot of times are like, oh, I don't like black women because they're ghetto and ratchet and loud and disgusting, and they go date a white woman. But the black women are literally their own moms, their sisters. Like, it's really a big issue, and we talk about it a lot in the community, or at least the parts of the community that I'm in. And so that was a big part of this book. But for Kennedy Ryan addressed those issues and made it very clear that Grip and Bristol are not doing that, because there's also can be a lot of fetishization, I can't really say that word, from white women to black women as well. And she really made sure that those were all discussed, which I feel like for a white reader, you may not really think of it because it may not seem like a big deal or something that you think of. Like, I was talking about this to Hailey about how this is an issue within the community, and she had no idea. But this is something that can be a big issue, and a lot of black women talk about this issue because it directly impacts them. But she never made me think for a second that they were with each other for the wrong reasons. They were definitely with each other for the love, which is definitely a thing for sure. But a lot of interracial relationships can definitely stem from these really bad stereotypes or fetishization. So I just think this was such a well-rounded, well-crafted romance, and I cannot wait to read the next book. This does not end on a cliffhanger, so like, honestly, I feel like I could stop right here and have them have their little happy ending, but there's a whole nother book, so I want to know, like, what conflict is coming next. I don't know, but I highly recommend this. It is so good, and again, I know some people are kind of put off from Kennedy Ryan because her books really can deal with some hard topics, like domestic abuse, for example, but this one is a little bit less hard to read, so I would definitely recommend this one. It is phenomenal.
Last book that I read this month is a 5-star, and it is literally a favorite of all time, favorite of the year for sure, and that's All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. You can see I got this at Half Price Books in Austin because we don't have any half price books in this area, so I need to take off the sticker, but I haven't hauled these books yet, and I haven't put them into my book app that I got from Half Price Books, so I haven't taken off the sticker yet. But I absolutely loved this story. This is my favorite S.A. Cosby by far. I was telling everybody that this is like literally if S.A. Cosby was writing like a Grant County, like Karen Slaughter book, that's what this is. Don't get it twisted. This book is dark. She's very, very dark. So please be careful when going into this one. It has a lot of content around children and like filming kind of like snuff related to children and stuff like that, so please be careful when going into this because she is dark and not for the faint of heart. I love S.A. Cosby's writing so much. It is literally delicious and I eat it up every single time. And then his character work is unmatched. I don't know how, but S.A. Cosby literally makes me fall in love with his characters every time. And that's so odd because they're normally completely different from me. They're normally like these older black men, but sometimes white men as well. And they're normally like in a completely different life stage than me, dealing with completely different issues than me. And sometimes it can be really hard for me to connect to male characters. And I connect to these every single time. I will say that S.A. Cosby's like Razor Blade Tears and Blacktop Wasteland are a lot more like fast-paced, kind of like action movie stories, while this one is a little bit slower and it's more of like a detective perspective, detective story. And personally, I love a detective perspective. I love a detective story. I know that's not for everybody. I know a lot of people don't like that. But if you like the Grant County series by Karen Slaughter and like no other detective perspectives or stories, I would still recommend this one because, as I said, they give very similar like themes, content, level of darkness to me. And I just absolutely eat it up. Okay, it is so, so good. This one just had like so much plot to it and so many kind of like twists and turns, and I loved where it ended up. I think it was done so well, and the content was handled so beautifully because of course it's S.A. Cosby. I love Sean Andre Cosby. Okay, I'll put it out there. And I reposted him on my story once and I tagged him and he didn't see it. So Sean, if you're watching this, please be my friend. I literally love you. And this one was also in my summer Halloween reading vlog. So if you want more thoughts, check that out. But this one is literally on my favorites of the year. I absolutely love her, and she is different than Razor Blade Tears. I know some people didn't like that one because it like just wasn't their favorite because it's more like action movie-y, or like, you know, he kind of was trying to make you feel for certain characters that, like, you know, aren't great. But to me, there really aren't bad people in the world. I think there's very broken people, and for sure people do bad things, but I think that there is some level of redemption. Whether you want to give it to people or not, that's a different story. But I think people can grow and change, and I think that was shown throughout that story. But I know some people didn't like it because of that, and this one doesn't have that. But again, it is more of like a slower detective story, so I know a lot of people don't like that either. You know, Sean is really doing it out here for the crime mystery girlies, and if you're not a crime mystery girly, I don't know if you're gonna love her, but I absolutely ate her up. So that's all that I have for this video today. I hope that y'all enjoyed it. Let me know any of your thoughts on the ones that I've read, because I would love to hear anything down below from y'all, or any books that you read in the month of July that you think I should read or that you would recommend to me. I would love to hear that as well. If you made it to the end, leave the little moon emoji down below for All the Sinners Bleed. I think this is a moon. It could be a sun, but I think it's a moon. So we're gonna leave the moon emoji. Plus, I love the moon. So yeah, that's it, and I will see y'all in my next one. Bye, everybody.
Trying to look like you're winning. I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking the moments we live in. Yeah, you got the nerve to be on me, faking your life for the IG. If you got my